the display of the Ten Commandments in every classroom in public, elementary, secondary, and post-education schools in the state of Louisiana. Because if you want to respect the rule of law, you got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses.
That's right.
Amen.
All right.
God gave, Moses received.
Hello, and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. What you just saw there is Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry signing a new law on Juneteenth of all days, requiring all public school classrooms in the state to display the Ten Commandments. This makes Louisiana the first state to require this, and it's one of the latest examples of blatant Christian nationalism in America. And today we're talking about how we're taking legal action against this unconstitutional decision. I'm Sam Grover, Senior Counsel here at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. We have a lot to get to today, and joining me in studio is Sammy Lawrence, one of our legal fellows.
Hello. It's great to be here today, as always, in sunny Madison, Wisconsin. And besides talking about Louisiana and our recent lawsuit, we'll also be talking about some recent Supreme Court cases and other state church-related happenings across the country. And joining us remotely is our legal director, Patrick Elliott.
Hi, happy to join you both today.
As always, we want to hear what you're thinking about the topics we discussed today. Please leave your questions in the chat below or email them to askanatheist@ffrf.org. So, Sam, do you want to start us off by talking about our Louisiana lawsuit that we just filed last week?
Yeah. Let's dive deeper into the Louisiana situation. So Louisiana just passed a law that would put the Ten Commandments in every public school classroom across the country. It's making national headlines. But Sammy, can you talk a bit more specifically about what the law is actually demanding?
So the law is demanding that the Ten Commandments be posted in every public school in Louisiana. So that's grades kindergarten up through public colleges. And it's a specific version of the Ten Commandments. I think that we have a graphic of that we'll put up so the audience can see. Of course, this is problematic for a wide variety of reasons, including that the government is choosing a specific interpretation and translation of the Ten Commandments. I'm sure our audience knows, and all probably Christians and religious people in the U.S. know that the Ten Commandments vary from sect to sect, religion to religion. There are many different interpretations and translations of them. And this particular translation that the government of Louisiana has chosen includes more than 10 commandments.
That's right. This really is 10 commandments by committee. So as you can see in the graphic there, if you were counting, there are 12 separate commandments that the government has chosen to put up there. Patrick, what do you think? That's one more than on display in Arkansas. So is Louisiana trying to get the upper hand here?
Yeah, and I think that this comes up a lot with, over the years, the many state church disputes we've dealt with the Ten Commandments, including we've taken at least 3 prior cases about the Ten Commandments in schools. And one of the things it seems that even Christians are surprised by is that this is just some, excerpts, an edited version from the Bible. And from, in this instance, one specific translation of the Bible, which seems to, exclude not just, Jews and other individuals that wouldn't use that translation, but even among Christians. And so it's a little surprising that people think, oh, the Ten Commandments, that's just this thing that exists out there. But really, you have to have somebody go in and edit out all the language that they're actually cutting out from the Exodus version that they're using here. And then picking a particular translation, and then picking a particular order. And these ones aren't numbered, but sometimes we see them numbered in various ways because, the different, both the Jewish and different Christian religions use different versions. So it is problematic, and this does become a part of the public complaint that we filed last week in this case with with other groups. So we're working with Americans United, with the ACLU of Louisiana, and a national law firm to challenge this on behalf of 9 families. And, it's a problem that the state has really decided this is the 10 Commandments and is putting that up in front of all of the public school children in the state of Louisiana.
I mean, wars have been fought over the wording in this document, right? So for Louisiana to come in and say, oh, well, we're definitely going to go with kill, not murder. We're going to go with prohibiting graven images, even though that goes against Catholic teachings. We're going to cut out most of the preamble that Jews consider to be one of the commandments. All of that, it touches on serious theology.
Yeah,
right. I think that's one of the legal problems. Yeah, just that, people, and including some of the plaintiffs in this case include, religious plaintiffs. We have, people from different backgrounds that object to that aspect, that the state's really weighing in on a version that conflicts with their personal religious beliefs. So besides our non-religious plaintiffs, it's a problem that the state is really weighing in on a theology dispute or a theological question at all.
Yeah. So what's actually happening, Sammy, with this version of the 10 Commandments that Louisiana has crafted?
So the law mandates that the 10 Commandments be put up in every classroom. It has to be a poster or a framed document. The commandments must be the central focus of the document or poster. They have to be at least size 14 font on 11 by 14 inch paper at the minimum. Really, the government is doing everything it can to make sure that these commandments are very easily readable and essentially unavoidable. Students won't be able to go into a classroom without seeing them and taking notice of this display.
Yeah, and you might be wondering how lawmakers in Louisiana are defending this decision, given all the problems that we just identified right off the bat. So let's hear straight from Republican Representative Lauren Ventrella, one of the co-authors of the bill, who went on CNN to justify Louisiana's 10 Commandments law.
What's important about this bill and what's important to remember about this country is that whether we like it or not, Moses is in the Supreme Court of the United States. The 10 Commandments are in the Supreme Court of the United States. Moses is on the law in Congress. This is part and ingrained in our nation. This is a historical document that's important in Louisiana because in Louisiana, we believe in faith, family, and freedom, and that is why I voted in favor of this bill.
Yeah, I mean, Moses is on the Supreme Court along with a bunch of other, law-giving characters throughout the ages. So it's not exactly like it's the 10 Commandments specifically on the Supreme Court. And the tablets are on the Supreme Court, an image of tablets, but not actual wording of the 10 Commandments. So she's got some of her facts muddled there.
Right. Also, just reference to this as like a historical document. I mean, it's not, right? This is a version that somebody has kind of personally crafted, and it's not a document in itself. It's obviously an excerpt with a lot of language cut out from biblical translation. So even that, it's obvious that there's a number of problems with the legislators who are trying to justify this.
Yeah. And if the legislators were so concerned about history and the founding of our country, why not put the Constitution on the wall or something, on which our country is actually founded? But no, obviously that's not the purpose of what they're doing here. All right. And of course, there are so many problems with this law, and Representative Ventrella's comments. CNN's anchor grilled her a little bit about that, so let's watch how that played out.
Because if someone has a home in which they choose to believe something different, which is welcome in this country, it's literally why people fled to come here to found this country to begin with, then they should be allowed to. And it's not really an option if you're requiring it to be put up in the wall of a classroom. What do you say to the parents of students or even teachers who don't share your religious views?
Don't look at it.
What would you say if your child had to go to a classroom in which the 5 pillars of Islam were required to be on the wall? How would you feel?
Again, this is not about the 5 pillars of Islam. This bill specifically states the 10 commandments.
Wow, what a strong rebuttal. I'm sold, personally.
Yeah, it's like she didn't understand that, that was identifying a problem by analogy. She's just like, oh, no, don't worry, no Islam in the public schools.
Yeah, I like that she's just like, we do not care about these children's feelings, to be clear.
Yeah. Yeah, so she obviously dodged the question or even misunderstood the question. She went on to say that she doesn't understand why litigation is being threatened, and even said, bring it on. Governor Landry also said he, quote, can't wait to be sued. Well, Governor, your wish has been granted. Yeah, so we've filed lawsuit on behalf of 9 different plaintiff families. These are atheists and agnostics, they're Christian, they're minority religious parents, and they all take issue with the state of Louisiana telling their students in public schools what religious beliefs to hold. And so,
yeah, and it might be helpful, to talk about some of the legal background here too. We've got 3 lawyers on this show, so why not, inform our viewers? But this isn't the first state to try this. It's Kentucky did this in 1980, passed a law to say they were going to put up the 10 Commandments in all classrooms. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court shortly thereafter struck that down, finding it was unconstitutional, and in doing so, kind of referenced what we're talking about here, that if these are going to have any effect, it's to try to influence, the behavior and religious beliefs of the children within the school system. And so that was ruled unconstitutional. That's still good law today, despite what I think some legislators and politicians in Louisiana want to think. But I think it's problematic, obviously, for the state of Louisiana trying to push the envelope and saying, okay, we're going to, do this and have this hope that somehow, the Supreme Court's going to overturn its 1980 decision. Stone versus Graham is that case.
Yeah. So why now, right? If the law has been settled since 1980, and why is Louisiana pushing this bill now in 2024? It's it's partly the makeup of the Supreme Court, right? They can count heads on the Supreme Court and see that there are a lot of justices there who tend to entertain Christian nationalist values and positions on in various legal arguments, and they think, why not make a new case and try to change the law, even though literally nothing else has changed. There's no reason to overturn Stone v. Graham, but that's what they're asking, essentially.
Yeah, and don't you think, I mean, that they're miscalculating too? I think, we have a Supreme Court that's done a lot of disastrous things, including this term. But in some of their more recent cases on religion, including on the coach praying case, Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, the court approvingly cites the cases about, kind of coerced prayer in schools. And so even for this court, it certainly seems that there are justices, a majority of justices are very concerned about, public schools improperly coercing students to engage in religion or religious practices. So I think it's a miscalculation, obviously, from the other side. But we understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to push this a certain argument to the court with the particular hope. And I think they're going to ultimately be proven wrong in that regard.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. Sammy, you want to add anything?
I definitely agree with that. I think if there's any concern, it's with the probability that they're going to push a historical kind of originalist argument. Possibly, that would be very likely, since some of the justices have seemed very sympathetic to these armchair historian arguments about our nation's founding and what the framers believed. But I think in our lawsuit, we're already working to combat some of that before it even comes up.
Yeah, certainly the Louisiana legislature is teeing up some of those arguments, right? So they try to justify their law based on this historical narrative that they've concocted, including a quote from James Madison that is demonstrably false. It's a made-up quote, and so they're saying, yes, here, we want to, honor our nation's history with this fake Madison quote. Right. So our families, again, we have 9 different plaintiff families from different religious and non-religious backgrounds. And so far, they've been good enough to respond to this law by volunteering their names to this lawsuit. They're plaintiffs on behalf of themselves and their school-aged children. And some of them have been good enough to get on camera and talk to the media and to people throughout the U.S. Just about the impact that this 10 Commandment law will have on their ability to raise their children in the belief system that they choose.
Yeah, and I think one of the concerns, and this is reflected in the complaint, is that particularly this came up for some of the non-religious plaintiffs in the complaint, but, do they feel like that they have to hide who they are? Do they have to self-censor their sharing, their disagreement with this, their non-religious views? That's a problem for them, attending public schools and really putting this in every single classroom for students to have to confront each other or with their teachers. It really adds this element of divisiveness that I think some of our plaintiffs really strongly object to the idea that this is something that their kids are going to have to deal with every day in every single classroom. I think it's a problem for them.
Yeah, well put. All right. So before we go to our next story, we just want to say that this law is just one of many efforts by Christian nationalist lawyers, lawmakers, think tanks to try to use this conservative-leaning Supreme Court to close the gap between religion and government. So last month, members of the National Association of Christian Lawmakers held their national policy conference. And we're going to play a few clips of an attorney with the conservative legal group First Liberty Institute, who laid out their agenda very clearly.
A couple of weeks ago, I was down in Louisiana testifying in the Senate Education Committee on their bill to put 10 Commandments back up in the schoolhouses. That bill is now sitting on the governor's desk just waiting to be signed, and that's going to be the first state, and I would think by no means the last. We're helping several jurisdictions start planning to put 10 Commandments monuments back on, whether it's state grounds, county grounds, city grounds, whatever that is. The Kennedy case to religious liberty is kind of like the Dobbs case was to the pro-life movement, right? It was a fundamental shift that is very much in favor for us. So many times it seems like we're playing defense and we're reacting to things, but why not go on offense? And why not assert our rights, especially with this opportunity that we've been given that we have not had in half a century?
Yeah, that opportunity that he's referring to is the makeup of the Supreme Court, right?
Yeah,
okay.
and I just was going to ask you both about the idea that this is going up, that 10 Commandments are going up in all these other places. Certainly we've, at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, have had to respond to some of those efforts, including, somebody who wanted to put that up in a jail or in public schools. But for the most part, I don't know what he's talking about yet. And maybe this is things that they have in the works that we have to watch out for. So I don't know if you have any reaction to the idea that this is going on all over the place right now. I haven't observed that yet.
No, Louisiana's actions here are fairly unprecedented, right? There's no other state requiring this in public schools. But there is something of a race to the bottom or a race to the far right, I guess, in different states throughout the country. So why don't we shift our attention and talk a little bit about Oklahoma, which followed suit a week after Louisiana passed its 10 Commandments law. So last week, Oklahoma's Republican State Superintendent Ryan Walters, not to be outdone by Louisiana and in a desperate cry for attention, ordered public schools to incorporate the Bible into lessons for grades 5 through 12. This is another blatant attempt to violate the Constitution. Let's play a clip from his announcement.
It is essential that our kids have an understanding of the Bible and its historical context. So we will be issuing a memo today that every school district will adhere to, which is that every teacher, every classroom in the state will have a Bible in the classroom and will be teaching from the Bible in the classroom to ensure that this historical understanding is there for every student in the state of Oklahoma.
Yeah, so there's been a bit of a mad scramble in Oklahoma after he made those remarks to actually try to figure out how to implement what he said, because it's not at all clear that he actually has the power to do the things he said. So we're going to be monitoring that decision closely to see how it gets implemented, because we're no strangers to Ryan Walters' Christian nationalist attacks on our public schools. He and people like him, they don't understand that true religious freedom means the freedom to choose what to believe and what to teach to one's own children within the religious sphere.
Yeah, and you had referenced some of the prior, why he's prior known to us. One of the things he did earlier this school year was go to one of the elementary schools there and film himself delivering a prayer to all the students. So not only was it something, religion that he wanted to bestow on these public school students at a school, by the way, that he doesn't work at. He's the state superintendent of instruction. But he wanted to film it and then tweet it out. So there's very much a flair for self-promotion in what's going on there, and a reaction to what's going on in Louisiana. I think you're right, Sam. Oh, how do I one up them is kind of what's going on, I think, with Ryan Walters.
Yeah, I think in Texas, they were bemoaning the fact that they couldn't be the first state to try to put the Ten Commandments in public schools, and they resolved to be the second. So, this is a sentiment shared throughout the country that politicians can score cheap political points by pandering to this ultra religious right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is, I think it's important to note that this is a very vocal group, but they're ultimately the minority. Like, parents in Louisiana don't want this. Earlier this year, I believe, some lawmakers in Louisiana had attempted to pass a bill that would give students in public school free breakfast and free lunch, and the legislature did not pass that, but yet they passed this, quite frankly, useless bill to put religious propaganda in children's schools, and that's not what the majority wants. I'm sure most parents would prefer their children be fed instead of have to look at the Ten Commandments every day.
Yeah, and I think you see the same reaction in the Oklahoma parents and the Oklahoma educators who, are just given this directive saying, he's saying with Ryan Walters in Oklahoma saying that schools must comply. The Attorney General in Oklahoma has come out and said that he doesn't think that the state superintendent has this authority because local school boards have ultimate authority on deciding curriculum and materials. So there is almost an internal dispute within the government there about whether this can be something that the state superintendent can just will upon everyone. So we're still waiting, I think, at FFRF, and others are waiting to see how he thinks this is possible and how he thinks this can be implemented, because the parents there don't like it. I don't think the schools or the teachers like it. And certainly it's not one of these that's like, oh, this is just a popular policy. I think it's actually quite, it's not popular at all.
Yeah, exactly. Oklahoma, I believe, is ranked 49th in education right now, since Walters has been in that position for over a year. And I'm sure parents would prefer that the state superintendent focus on actual teaching instead of the Bible, so that maybe they can someday be like 45th again. So there is some good news from Oklahoma in the last couple of weeks. The Oklahoma Supreme Court did decide that the nation's first religious public charter school cannot move forward. And that's a situation that FFRF has been involved in with a coalition. Patrick, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we're working jointly with parents in Oklahoma and other legal groups. We actually have a pending lawsuit that's not final resolved with Americans United and the ACLU and the Education Law Center challenging this. This was the St. Isidore Catholic Virtual Charter School that under Ryan Walters, there's a virtual charter school board that approved this. While our lawsuit was pending, the Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma, Genter Drummond, filed with the Oklahoma Supreme Court to block this. And so just last week, thankfully, the Oklahoma Supreme Court ruled resoundingly on our side, on our favor, and said not only is this unconstitutional under the federal Establishment Clause, but this cannot be allowed under Oklahoma's constitution. And so that ruling, I think, is great in the sense that the U.S. Supreme Court may not be able to easily overturn it because it's resting on, an independent state law decision that this is something that Oklahoma won't tolerate, regardless of how the U.S. Supreme Court wants to interpret the Establishment Clause. So we expect that the school will try to file a petition with the Supreme Court and assert a free exercise argument to be allowed to do this. That will probably take, a few months to play out. But for now, I think it is really good news that from a conservative state, the state Supreme Court has ruled, for state church separation in a pretty resounding way.
Yeah, definitely. It's certainly better than the alternative result, right?
Yeah.
All right. So before we answer some questions from the audience, we want to touch on one more news story that came out recently, which is that the U.S. Supreme Court released a decision allowing a lower court to once again block Idaho from enforcing its extreme abortion ban in emergency medical situations, at least while the case continues to work its way through the court system. This means Idaho doctors will be able to resume offering pregnant patients emergency abortion care in that state.
Exactly. So the Supreme Court basically just chose to dodge the bullet for now and decided that a case where the Biden administration is suing Idaho because of how it's preventing doctors from performing abortions that are required by the federal law EMTALA, which is the Emergency Medical Transfer and Labor Act. So EMTALA says that if you're a hospital and you receive Medicare funding from the federal government, you have to provide care to stabilize a patient if they come into your hospital in an emergency medical condition. And sometimes that care is an abortion, in certain very unfortunate circumstances. But because Idaho has an extreme abortion ban that says you can't perform an abortion unless the doctor is essentially positive that the patient is going to die if they don't get it. Whereas EMTALA says you have to provide it to stabilize them, not just if you think they're going to die. So this case basically is just going back to the lower courts where it will eventually end up back at the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But so is the current status is Idaho is blocked, correct? Like the Supreme Court lifted its prior stay of an injunction. So right now, Idaho's blocked from, I guess, enforcing this against women or doctors in Idaho. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Doctors in Idaho should be able to, in their best medical judgment, perform an abortion if they believe it's necessary to stabilize a patient's condition, not just if they're essentially certain that the patient's going to die if they don't get it.
Wow, it's amazing that that's the little bit of progress that we're able to ask for here, right? It's amazing that a state would want to obstruct doctors and their ability to make those split-second medical decisions by passing a law that just sort of makes a blanket rule to be applied in all situations, even though the legislators aren't there to help doctors make those calls in the moment. And frankly, they don't have the training or expertise to help doctors make those decisions. But that's where we're at. All right, and on that bleak note, we're going to turn to some audience questions now. Thank you, viewers, for sending in your questions. So this first one is there a way to expose legislators pushing for the Ten Commandments displays to other cultures to show that there is no ethical superiority of this document over other religious texts? Yeah, you want to start like a program to send them abroad to do their spring break.
I mean, one thing, I guess we get this question a lot too, and I guess I'm interested in what you all, sometimes people say, well, if you put that up, you need to put up, the 5 pillars of Islam, or you need to put up other religious documents, or, the tenets of the Satanic temple. Right? We don't want, from a state church separation perspective, we don't want that. Like, that's not the solution. Is to have everybody press religion. The solution is to not, kind of go down this road at all. So I get the, this isn't exactly what the question's asking, but I think sometimes that gets pressed by people who are on our side who think that that's a helpful argument. But really, I don't think we want to join them. We want to make sure that strict state church separation is respected, rather than, everybody gets to be bothered that some religion is getting promoted by the state and by schools.
Yeah, you don't want to start this warring religious doctrines on classroom walls where in kindergarten classrooms we're pushing out the number line, we're pushing out the color wheel just so we can have 7 different religious texts on the walls. No, that's not the appropriate solution here. All right. So another question here. Have any religious voices spoken out against Louisiana's 10 Commandments law, which I believe we answered that half of the question, but we can speak more to it. And does the lawsuit prevent it from being put in place until there's a concrete conclusion? That part, I think we did probably fail to talk about that. So I'll start there. Now that we've filed the lawsuit, the next step here is we're filing shortly what's called a motion for a preliminary injunction, and that we're asking the court basically to decide that we are more likely than not going to win this case ultimately based on the binding Supreme Court precedent that currently exists in Stone v. Graham. And so we're asking the court to prevent the 10 Commandments from going up in any Louisiana classroom this school year as the case proceeds. So until the case comes to a conclusion, if our motion is granted, the 10 Commandments will not go up in any public school classroom this year.
Yeah, and on the first part of the question, we mentioned, the beliefs of our plaintiffs, but as this was going through the legislature, there were also quite a few interfaith groups, including Baptists, Jewish groups, pushing against this, who did not want to see this seen. So who did not want to see this law go into effect. So I do think that there is a huge amount of people, including religious and non-religious, that oppose this type of effort by the government. And thankfully, a lot of Christians are joining us on this and really pushing back as well.
Yeah. All right. Next question is about the Oklahoma charter school situation. So since this ruling came down denying this religious charter school in Oklahoma, do you think that the founders, those involved in that school, will make a second attempt within that state? Will someone similar move on to another state, or will they convert to a completely private school?
Yeah, there's kind of a lot of issues with that. So the first thing is, I don't think that they can go back to Oklahoma and do this because of how definitive that Supreme Court decision is. Now that's not the end of the line yet, because they're obviously going to try to go to the U.S. Supreme Court and argue that somehow Oklahoma was violating free exercise, but they're not going to do that. We also have an agreement, and this is a part of our case, that they cannot open for sure for the 24-25 school year. So this charter school, regardless of what happens in the courts going on right now, will not open at least until well after another year. But I think the questioner is correct to wonder what's next for this. Are there going to be other states where this is going to be pushed? This was a push out of a clinic at the Notre Dame, law school, who wanted to kind of insert Catholic education into public charter schools. So I don't know that they're going to end here. They may try this somewhere else. And so that's something we're definitely going to be watching for.
Yeah. All right. We have one here on the EMTALA decision. Basically, is this an actual setback to anti-abortionists? Could Christian nationalists seek to have this overturned in the near future?
I don't think it's a setback really at all. The best reading of this is the Supreme Court decided that they were just a little too hasty in reviewing it, and they're going to let the lower courts hash it out before they eventually review it for real. This isn't like binding precedent from the Supreme Court saying Idaho's wrong or anything. They just did this really unusual thing where they basically just did a take-back of their own review. So it's unfortunately not a setback for the anti-choice movement at all. It's just a delay, maybe.
Yeah.
And one of the, Sammy, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but isn't one of the groups of attorneys representing Idaho is Alliance Defending Freedom in this case, right? This Christian Nationalist outfit is actually representing a state before the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yes. I believe it is ADF who's representing Idaho, which is very unusual. Usually states do not have clearly religious extremist groups representing them in court, especially before the Supreme Court. It's really concerning, honestly, that a state chose to make this kind of public alliance with an organization like ADF.
Yeah. All right. We have two more viewer questions here. The first one is asked specifically about the Louisiana bill, but I think we could apply it more broadly to all the different situations we've talked about here. Before an ultimate decision is made in this lawsuit, do you expect other states will follow suit and try to do the same thing? And will we have to, essentially chase these legislators state to state trying to put out each fire individually?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly seems to be an effort for people want to play copycat. For example, Texas specifically, if they want to do it, they probably can't start that until well into 2025 because they're out of legislative session until then. If other states want to do it, that may be, they may have pause in doing that because we think, in this case, we're going to go forward with this preliminary injunction that Sam had mentioned and hopefully get a court order to block it. So I think it'd be quite unwise, that's not stopped people before, to proceed on something that has been ruled to be unconstitutional. So we'll have to see, and I'm not aware, and I don't think either of you are aware of other pending bills right now in state legislatures. I think a lot of state legislatures are in recess or not in session right now, but that's something that at FFRF, our legislative team is monitoring, and certainly us on the legal team are monitoring because yes, this would be something we'd have to challenge if they go forward with it. But right now, I don't think there's anything on the precipice of becoming law in another state, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, well put. And also importantly, if another state does choose to do this, rather than taking the wait and see approach based on our current lawsuit, the second lawsuit is a lot easier to win than the first one, right? If we defeat this law in Louisiana and another state has tried to do the same thing, we can point to that decision in the Louisiana lawsuit as binding authority as well. And typically those cases go rather quickly compared to a case that where the binding precedent is from 1980. All right, one last question. Sammy, this one's for you. The viewer didn't say that, but I want to hear from you on this. Okay. Do any of these current situations we've talked about or the decisions coming down give you hope? Do you feel like Christian nationalism is starting to be beaten back?
I don't think the Supreme Court is going to beat back Christian nationalism anytime soon. Unfortunately, I think there are some good lower courts out there in the federal court system and some state courts that are pretty strong on these issues. But I think if anything is hopeful at all, it's seeing younger people and their reaction to what's going on and seeing them actually be involved in the political and legal process, as well as the many religious Americans who have been very outspoken and being opposed to the Christian nationalist agenda. I think that's the most hopeful thing recently.
Yeah, well put. Probably also important to go vote in elections and things of that nature. Just a thought. All right. So with that, that wraps up this week's episode of FFRF's Ask an Atheist. Don't miss our weekly radio show, Free Thought Radio. This week, our co-presidents, Annie Laurie Gaylor and Dan Barker, will speak with Samuel Perry, an award-winning professor of sociology and religious studies at the University of Oklahoma. They'll be talking more about the increasing threat of Christian nationalism in America. You can find Free Thought Radio at ffrf.org/radio or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't miss We Dissent is the only podcast out there with all women constitutional lawyers discussing state church issues. You can find We Dissent wherever you get your podcasts or at we-dissent.org.
And if you want more information about the Freedom from Religion Foundation, check out our website at ffrf.org. If you're a member already, thank you. If not, please join us. And see you next week on FFRF's Ask an Atheist.